What is up, gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode on the channel. On today's episode, we'll be looking at how us as men can use fashion in a different way. So what is fashion, and ultimately what implications does it have in terms of how we signify our status, how we signify our position in this world, and how we fit amongst the tribe? And ultimately, if we have a key change, a core change that we want to make in this life for ourselves and those around us, how we can actually use fashion to catapult us into the version of the person that we wish to become. Let's start off by allowing you to reframe the way that you think about fashion. Most men who are quite apathetic towards fashion in general look at fashion in two key ways. They look at it as either bad or as good. This binary way does not give you the tools that you need to actually think about fashion effectively. So instead of looking at fashion as good or bad, we look at fashion as effective for our purpose and our desired results, or ineffective. Let me give you guys a very clear example. Someone like me who works in an office setting and I'm forced to be able to engage and interact with customers, to be presentable in front of the camera, and ultimately to be able to lead my team. An effective use of fashion would be a type of fashion that creates that image and allows me to pursue the version of myself that is most conducive towards leading my team, selling my clients, and serving my clients, and ultimately cultivating a strong and effective force. On the flip side, an ineffective version of my fashion is something that inspires none of what I just mentioned. Someone else who may actually have a different goal, an athlete perhaps, an athlete that is spending 18 hours, 12 hours, 16 hours on the field in the training facilities, will not want to dress like me. The type of dress that I wear is not an effective form of fashion for that specific athlete, nor does it also communicate the version of themselves that they wish to communicate. So it's important to know what your end goal is and to use fashion to the effect or to the detriment of your specific and desired goal. Now, most likely you're a man and you have engaged in some way, shape, or form with fashion in the past. I typically find that we can categorize men into three key categories in terms of their personal relationship with fashion. On the first side of the spectrum, you have those that are extremely apathetic. They don't care about fashion at all. They put zero to negative effort into the way that they dress and the way that they appear to the world. In the middle of the spectrum, you have those that are neutral, that they do just enough to actually fit into the tribe so they don't stick out like a sore thumb. And this is generally the category that most men fall into. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have those that are focused. They're willing to actually go ahead and to cultivate a vision and appearance for themselves. And even those men, they fall into two different mini categories. You have those that aspirate and those that rebel. So those that try to create a version that is completely contrary to what is normalized and what is popular. And those types of people, yes, sure, they care about their fashion a lot, but they tend to be more on the rebellious side of fashion. And those that aspirate, they tend to create visual appeals that we can all aspire to, that we can all look up to, that we say when we look at that person, that that's someone who understands style, that's someone who understands fashion. So even within the extreme side of the spectrum, you have your negative and you have your positive. Those that are using fashion for bad and those that are using fashion ultimately to create an image that we can all aspire towards. An important thing to consider when looking at the role of fashion in the social sphere that we're all undoubtedly going to find ourselves in is two things: enclothed cognition and the halo effect of fashion. Most men don't realize that the way that you dress has the ability to say things about yourself without you even having to say it about yourself, right? It's the way that we create a conscious version of ourselves, a visual version of ourselves that gets into the minds of others simply by the way we dress. It's the halo effect. If you look at the halo effect, it's been done many, many times and it's done across many different industries. A good company that is a good example of this is Audi. Audi wanted to get into the sports car space. They had the A4, they had the A5, they had the A6, but they still were not being taken seriously as a sports car manufacturer. That's why they came out with the Halo car, the concept car at the time, which was the R8. The R8 was a revolution for Audi, and it created and it set themselves in the sports car place. It sets them, or it created a marker for what Audi could be, and that Halo car, though unattainable to many of Audi's original customers, had a trickle-down effect, and it painted with a rosy brush all of the other cars in Audi's lineup. And you also have the ability to do that to yourself and to your image and to your vision and to the way that you're perceived in the world through your clothing. Another way that I highly encourage you guys to reframe the ways that you think about your daily fashion, the way that you dress yourself, the way that you present yourself, is to think strategically as opposed to tactically. And your question might be, what is the difference between thinking strategically about fashion and thinking tactically about fashion? I find that strategic thinking tends to be more long-term thinking. You're slowly, through small calculated steps, through small calculated changes, changing the way that you are perceived and the way that you perceive yourself, versus when you're operating tactfully. Your changes tend to be more abrupt. They tend to be more in your face, and they tend to be less accepted by those around you. So think about the way that you want your fashion to be perceived in a strategic standpoint. What is the end goal? What is the 1 year, 2 year? What type of person do you wish yourself to be in the next 6 months, 12 months, 2 years? By having a clear vision for yourself and having a clear strategy for your life, you're ultimately able to dress and to adorn yourself with the uniform that is going to get you there in the right way, in the most tasteful way, in the most acceptable and presentable way. One thing that I also find a lot of men, they neglect to do is to dress themselves in a way that presents their body in the best possible shape. At the end of the day, as masculine men, we are meant to be physically capable beings. One thing that I see and that I find very, very jarring is that most men have the appearance of zero physical prowess. They look like they could be blown away by a gust of wind. And this also comes down to the way that we dress ourselves. As men, we need to be able to emphasize the parts of our physiques that are the most dominant, the most physically prowess. By doing this, we're able to project a masculine version of ourselves that is able to give us the confidence that we need to move through the world. Make sure that you're selecting clothing that allows you to create a stronger stature, a more elongated physique, a trimmer waist, wider shoulders, a bigger chest, a wider back. You do this by selecting clothing that is visually concentrated in those areas and is fitted in ways that is able to elongate and to enhance and to enlarge these areas. At the end of the day, you have two choices. Either you could be apathetic and tell yourself that why should I care? And why should I even spend a single second longer than I have to on these areas? Or you can tell yourself, I'll give myself every single advantage that I can because I owe it to myself to do so, to put in the effort, to be conscious of how I present myself and how I move through the world. And therefore, I will choose to dress myself in a way that is going to present myself in the best possible light, both mentally, spiritually, and also physically. Now you understand the mechanics of how fashion can have a deep and profound change in terms of how people perceive you and how you fit into the world. What are different archetypes? What are different types of looks that you as a man can go for? Well, there are many, but I've categorized them into 3 of the ones that I find to be the most popular and the ones that you can actually go into today. The first one is going to be the rugged man. This is the man with an edge, the man with a little bit of a dangerous nature to him. This tends to be the outdoorsy look. This tends to be a little bit more of that biker look. In the middle, you have your refined look. This is the suit. This is the pristine look. This is the preppy look. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have the rake. The rake is a very flamboyant person, a person that the design sort of enhances and it intoxicates and it creates a version and a vision of this person that is otherworldly. Here you might want to use textured fabrics like velour, leather fabrics with a lot of patterns, with high contrast, with a lot of boldness, with a lot of flamboyance to them. So each of these 3 different categories says something about you that the others don't. And it's important to be strategic when cultivating the version of yourself and the vision that you wish to project. I typically find that I like to focus on one of these categories as opposed to spreading myself thin throughout all 3. And I did this and I made this conscious decision early on as to which of these categories spoke most to me and was going to be most effective. Again, this comes back to the idea of tactics versus strategies. What is my long-term strategy for my life? What is my long-term strategy for the business that I'm in, for the people that I connect with, for the relationships I want to cultivate? How do I wish to project myself, not only to myself, but to those around me? And I chose to go for more of that middle ground look, the look that was more refined, the look that was more pristine. And that just is something that appeals to me, but that might not be your choice. So make sure you're selecting the choice that is right for you. I want to end this episode with a note that I'm sure all of you have noticed at some point or another, but you cannot escape the idea of fashion. Whether you're apathetic to it or whether you're a fashionista, at the end of the day, fashion is everywhere. We all as humans have an intrinsic need to fit into the tribes that we're put in. Whether we are apathetic or whether we are more ingrained into the fashion choices that we make, those around us ultimately enhance and enforce the version of ourselves that we wish to become. If you look at your specific city that you're in, or if you look at your specific country, or even if you look at the specific company that you're in, or your friend circle, those around you are going to paint a version of themselves onto you and are going to leave traces of themselves. And this may not even be a conscious choice. It may not be something that you've ever noticed before, but just take a look around those around you. And chances are you'll notice versions of those people just ingrain themselves into you. So be conscious of how you operate in this world and how you're fitting into the circle that you're in. Is it an accurate reflection of who you wish to be, or is it just something that's happened by mistake? Guys, let me know what you think about this episode. Let me know if you agree or disagree that by using fashion strategically, we can signal who we are and who we wish to be in a more effective way and move through the world in a way that makes more sense to us. Guys, from the very bottom of my heart, thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Until next time, we'll speak.